So lately, I keep hearing so many women come to me and they're saying the same thing. Like they're burned out, they're maxed out, the job feels like it's never done, right? And so if you're a woman in midlife, you might have expected things to feel a little bit different by this time in your life where your kids are a little bit grown. So you thought there would be a little bit more space for you to do the things that you dreamed of and you want to do. And then the strange thing is, even when you finally find that minute and that space, you don't even know what to do with it sometimes. Right? And so if you're like me, you've dreamed about this moment in your life where you finally get that quiet space, that quiet afternoon, and you think, boy, if I could just have 1 hour, I'd pray, I'd walk, I would work on my 90-day goal. And then, that quiet moment comes around, and instead of feeling peaceful, you find yourself feeling restless. So why does that happen? Well, my guest today, she has some really beautiful insights about all of that. And Stacy Jagger, I'm so glad you're here. She was my counselor about a decade ago when I was on that cusp of empty nest, but I had a really tragic thing happen in my life. It was one of the hardest moments of my life. And God used her in a really beautiful way to help me find beauty in the ashes. And she's also the author of 30-Day Blackout. And this book, I am going to tell you, this book is traditionally written for families. But as I recently went back and read it again, I feel like the principles are especially true for women in midlife as well. So keep an open mind because I think you're going to learn something today. I think you're going to have a good time with us. But Stacy, welcome. It's so good to see you again.
So good to see you, Michelle. So fun.
This is a full circle moment, isn't it? Because you really caught me at a weird stage of life where I felt like everything was falling apart, but I was really good at hiding it. And you just helped me get my footing again, right? And so that's what a really good counselor does is they come alongside of you. They don't tell you what to do. They kind of, well, I guess you did give me homework and we'll get into that. But she let me discover on my own where the Lord wanted to take me. It was just beautiful work. So, Stacy, before we get into your book, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, about your work, and then how did the 30-Day Blackout even begin?
Well, I'm a born and raised Nashvilleian. I've been married almost 27 years. I have 4 children. And sort of my claim to fame is I was the town drunk's kid of Nashville. My father was a lifetime alcoholic. My family and I were evicted 15 times by the time I finally left home at the age of 16 when a real estate agent here in town took me into her home. My senior year in high school, I went to UT Knoxville for a couple years. Met a man by the name of Dr. Jim Cofield, who was the grad psych director of Reformed Theological Seminary for like 16 or so years. He was my college pastor. I met this man who recognized I was very broken I guess I was 18, 19 years old. Got his wife's permission, Mona, for me to get into his car, took me all the way to Franklin, Tennessee to a Wounded Heart conference. And that began my journey of recovering from sexual abuse. I ended up in a mental hospital at 19 at the Minnereth Meyer New Life Clinic at 19, where I tried to take my own life. Because I was not successful, I threw a belt down and decided that I was going to climb the biggest mountain that I could imagine climbing. And that was 32 years ago. I met my husband at Belmont Church, but if you fast forward to the 30-Day Blackout book, I'll just kind of fast forward for a minute. My husband and I in our early 20s had the opportunity to live in a non-electric cabin for 18 months when I think I was 24, 25 years old. And it was a little 1850s cabin that had no electricity, no running water, no indoor plumbing. And on the front porch of that cabin, my nervous system regulated for the first time in my entire life. Now, if you don't understand the autonomic nervous system, that's just kind of a teaching for another day. But when you have lived in a sympathetic rev up or a dorsal parasympathetic collapse response in your nervous system all of your life, finding your window of tolerance, your sense of center, that heart space where God really wants us to live, that was a brand new experience for me. What ended up happening is I started to create a whole treatment protocol around digital detoxes that I call the mountain method. It's a 5-phase process that I've now created into a course where any family anywhere can do in the privacy of their own home, either with my help or without. It can either be self-led or I can coach you through it. And so it's been a really interesting journey in that in the field of child and family therapy, you're either going to run into a child therapist that does a lot of drop your child off purist play therapy, or you're probably going to run into more of an adult therapist that doesn't have a lot of experience working with children. And so the idea of working with the whole family on a child's behalf is really a unique process that I couldn't find anybody to teach me an easy way, like a simple, I can explain it to grandma kind of way to do it. So I just kind of took an axe and sort of figured it out, and am now teaching therapists with continuing education how to practice the way that I do. So it's just been a beautiful, to be the town drunk's kid and now to be teaching therapists how to work with families. It is, I told a good friend that if I had not been sexually abused as a child, I would be a choreographer, dancer on a cruise ship right now. That's where my life was headed. And nothing against cruise ship entertainers, but I'm so grateful. Like we can't go back and undo our story, right? So I'm now in a place where I'm so grateful that I had a broken story and that I get to do what I get to do now as an almost 52-year-old woman. I was just on a cruise with my 13-year-old, and I was looking around going, thank you, Jesus, that I did not become a cruise ship dancer, because that's literally what I wanted to do when I was little. Yeah. So
That's that's so
it is
awesome.
awesome.
It's interesting because I remember I wanna say it was the first session I had with you. You had me draw my mountain and what would be at the top. And I was so for me, just to set the stage for the audience who's listening, I was disconnected from myself. I just had no understanding of anything, emotions or anything. I was a workaholic. And so I didn't have a problem with screens at the time. I didn't have time for TV or cell phones. I rarely knew where it was, but Stacy caught that the screen I needed to derail from was my workaholism, right? And so I didn't know how to stop and pause. And she would I'd come into the her office and she would have me play with toys, and it felt so useless to me initially because it was like, I've got things to do and I'm giving you 45 minutes. And why are we wasting it with this? Right? Like for someone who's just unregulated, they don't understand the value of that play or
Mhm.
that space that's needed. And so she would send me on homework assignments to she said 12 minutes the first time, but I couldn't do 12 minutes. So we backed it up. But 12 minutes to just sit in silence, no book in hand, no anything. You're not allowed to necessarily have thoughts in your head with a purpose, like, and if my husband wanted to sit next to me and we weren't allowed to have a conversation, I just had to sit. And sitting in silence with yourself when you're used to just if I sat in my kitchen at the time, and even if the whole thing was clean, I'd feel like I'd have to sweep the floor again, like just because there'd be something I needed to do. So anyway, so for those of you who I'm pretty sure someone out there is going, well, I don't have a problem with screens. Well, there's probably somewhere that if you're not feeling connected to the people in your life, or yourself, or if you sit down to pray and your mind just starts racing because you're not able to connect with the Lord, there is a place that you can disconnect from. So if you think through that filter, all of this kind of comes into play. So you mentioned quickly about the parasympathetic system, and of course, we're not going to go into all of that. But for a midlife woman who is feeling overstimulated and distracted and in that wired but tired kind of place, because that's where I was, right? I'd love to kind of start there because, I had even a moment this week, full disclosure for everybody, where I just felt like, okay, I'm ready to burn it all down. I'm tired. I don't want to get in this pattern again. Like I know what this pattern feels like and I don't even want to go there, right? So I was just ready to burn it all down. But just like you just said, you look at your life now and you're so thankful that you're not on a cruise ship doing entertainment. Who would have ever thought? Because I surely don't I love being an introvert. Let me just say that. I surely do not want to necessarily be on camera or write a book or do anything. But when I took COVID time off from coaching and working with women, I ached inside because I wasn't doing the thing that I was meant to do. And now that I'm back to it, the Lord's just showing me better ways and different ways to do it that don't feel overwhelming to me to be on camera, right? So he always has a way of bringing us back around when we surrender. And that's what this blackout is, right? It's kind of a place of surrender.
It's really a Sabbath. I mean, if you boil it down, it's giving yourself a sense of rest, and I did not know how to rest, growing up. Things were so chaotic and so crazy. I was raised in domestic violence and, abuse and neglect, and it was bottom of the barrel, I'm telling you. Sometimes I wonder how I survived it, to be honest, but when I got my doctorate in ministry from a seminary, they gave me the opportunity to study the integration of creativity and spirituality in my work with children and families, utilizing the mountain method, which is basically the Sabbath. And, we don't really know how to rest anymore in the culture that we live in. And I'll be totally honest, I was name called lazy most of my childhood. And so I really had to overcome this idea that I was lazy. And I can absolutely echo what you're saying about workaholism, because I can absolutely overwork, especially when you love what you do. Sometimes you don't know when to quit. So, the idea of a 30-day blackout is really rest. And, I don't know if you've ever been there, Michelle, but the Abbey of Gethsemane up in Kentucky. My husband and I went together before we had children, and then I've probably been up there 6 to 8 times over the years. And it's a silent retreat, it's a monastery, and you do absolutely nothing. You're supposed to do absolutely nothing for days. And the first time I was up there, I was just like, "What in the world is happening?" I just couldn't. But, it becomes a practice, and then what ends up happening over time, I think, is that you become more connected to your true, authentic self, which is creative and curious and grounded, poised, and you feel good in your skin and in that heart space where God lives. And when you connect to that, you're not trying to run from, you're not. It was so funny. It was probably a couple years ago that I was walking a family through a digital detox. This is my office, in here, and I was trying to explain it to him, and he said, "Well, we're going to Spain next summer," and I was like, "Honey, this has nothing to do with Spain. This doesn't have one thing to do with Spain." So, the answer is right here, and the answers are so simple, but we make it so complicated. And me too. It's taken me all of my life to figure out how simple, but not easy life really is. So, thank you. By the way, you said something about the blackout being like a meta, and I started thinking about this, like the blackout really is a metaphor for winter and how things get dark but spring comes and there's kind of a death rebirth process, and turning everything off and stepping away really is it's an art. And if anything else, it becomes a conversation of like, "Oh my gosh, how are we gonna do that?" And "I can't live without my phone." And "What about my alarm clock?" And it becomes a conversation. Some people end up going kinda Amish, and other people just become more mindful and are putting their phones down during dinner. And Dr. Bill Sears, who wrote the foreword to my book, 30 Day Blackout, has a basket in the front of his house that says, "Welcome to the fun house. Place your phone here." And that's how he does screens in his home. Like, we're all different, so that there's no judgment here, but I love the conversation. So,
Yeah, and, I have 2 grandbabies now. I'll have to share pictures with you later, but, it's interesting because when they were first born and I'd come over to babysit my daughter, because of in my household, we didn't have cell phones out, right? So she was just like, "I don't want you to have your phone out, leave it in the car," and I was totally happy to. But I will say, grandparents break rules, and so I pull it out just long enough for us to make silly photos together. And so it was funny because even just he's 2 years old now, and just a couple weeks ago, he grabbed my phone, he brought it to me, crawled in my lap to take the photos, and then we put it away. And so it's nice when your screens can be a connective piece. Like, there's a healthy way, right? But I want to touch very shortly on, so what does, because I know for me, it was about all the tabs that were open in my brain, and I never even knew what it was like to have them closed,
no.
right? But that's not the experience for everyone here, right? So what does it cost a child and an adult, because I imagine it's similar, to have all that stimulation going when your TV's running? I know a lot of houses, they have multiple TVs running while they're also scrolling their phone. you know, what is that costing us as people in a society?
I just came out with a second edition of my book, and I added a chapter about the history of screen time, because if you go back in history, initially the screen brought a family together. They all kind of gathered around it, and you had to wait till the show came on and all that. It's like it's super exciting, and like we're going to do this thing. And then over time, as we all know, we ended up with these, Apple phones in our hands where everybody's in their own room, scrolling, isolated, and not to scare people, but we don't need white vans to kidnap our kids anymore, because there are predators actively going for our children in your home if you don't have proper parental controls on these phones, which is part of the testifying that I've done here in Nashville, with the Child Online Safety Act. Not to go down that path, but having said all that, if you look at it through the nervous system, and this is a big part of my course, you'll either see a child, if it's not balanced, you'll either see a child with a behavioral issue, which is actually a sympathetic rev up in the autonomic nervous system, or you'll see a child that's super shut down, isolated, doesn't want to talk, doesn't want to get off the couch. And some kids and adults will kind of go back and forth to either being angry and then shut down, angry, shut down. And then what's really interesting in a family is I will see parents where one parent has sort of an anger thing going on and the other parent is shut down. And if you look at it through the autonomic nervous system, it's two parents trying to balance each other out. The remedy to this is to find your window of tolerance, which is your heart space. And that's that centered, grounded, connected to yourself place that Michelle you're talking about that you found. And once you find that, there's not enough money in the world to replace the feeling of being connected to yourself. And when I first learned this phrase, being connected to yourself, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about right now. um, but it's to me, it's being connected to my true authentic self, who God made me, that place where I feel safe inside. So, and I'm just delighted that you are in a place that you figured it out, Michelle. We all have to figure it out, don't we? Somehow,
We
some
do. And
way.
that's a part of why I do what I do at Making Life Beautiful again. I'm like, I'll teach this a gazillion different ways. And if you catch it one day, from that angle, it did its thing, Well, obviously we want everybody to go buy your book. And I'm gonna tell all the midlife women listening to me right now, if you're buying the book for your children and their families, buy 2 copies, one for yourself because you're gonna want to read it too. Or don't crease the page cover. Just read through it before you gift it to them, because I'm going to tell you, you're going to thank me later. But what is one simple thing that they could start doing now, and what can they expect? I mean, you've got so many great client testimonials in your book at the end of each chapter, which really helps prepare you for what you're about to experience when you're walking through this process. But what is one simple thing that they can kind of do, a place to start?
The book was originally designed for parents with children ages 3 to 12. And then there's a modification for teenagers. But I will echo what you're saying, that there have been a lot of adults read the book and they actually read it through the lens of the child inside of themselves, that adult, child in you, that inner child. So you can kind of think about it like that if you choose to read the book. The one thing that I can say, makes the biggest difference with families that are not ready to do a digital detox is to take the screens out of the bedrooms. You can cut your screen time down dramatically and have more attention for yourself, your spouse, your kids, if there are not screens in the bedrooms. That's my number one recommendation. But the other thing is just to have a 30-minute blackout. Like the research on screens right now is we're on our screens 7 to 9 hours every day. So it takes a lot of intentionality now to go outside, take a walk, go for a bike ride, for a child to climb a tree. I mean, I'm amazed how kids don't break their legs anymore because they're not taking the risks to do so. Um, so it's really a real life reset at the end of the day. We are bombarded now with AI, and you can't even go get gas in your car without a screen staring at you. So if you can think about it more like a real life reset, and for your autonomic nervous system to have a reset, and whatever it is that you need to do for yourself to connect to you. Like for me, my husband and I go and we ballroom dance at the Brentwood Skate Center on Monday nights. And I love to Zumba, and I love to go for bike rides with my 10-year-old son. We're all different, as far as what do you need to get to be mindfully in the right here, right now. And that's the trick. My mom, before she passed away, she was painting, and, she wasn't a professional, but one of her last paintings, she painted the barn that says Sea Rock City, one of those painting party things. And it's my favorite thing in my house because every time I look at it, I think of my mother just going like this right here, you know, painting that barn. And it brings me so much joy to think about my mother being in the right here, right now. When I sit at the piano and I just dink around, and my son like looks over at me and he's like, my mom is just enjoying herself. It brings him so much joy. The clients that I work with that learn that it's not selfish to put yourself first, love yourself like you're loving your neighbor. When they make that paradigm shift, it can change the whole culture of the whole family.
And something you said really resonates, because I wouldn't say that before working with you, I hated myself. I just didn't value myself, right? I didn't value it enough to go, you know what, Michelle, that stuff can sit and wait for tomorrow. You should just go to bed. Everybody's body needs to go to bed, right? Or exercising is important. It's good for taking care of your body. Like, you want to be healthy and vital, have vitality. And I just never valued myself to give myself what I actually needed. These are things that you need. They're non-negotiables, right? Eating a healthy diet, you need it. but I wasn't giving myself needs so much as wants. And so I think a lot of people generally, they know they have all these wants and then they try to achieve the wants, but they feel stuck and don't find themselves getting there. And I think you kind of nailed it. Part of it is just literally that connecting with yourself, giving yourself permission to rest, give yourself permission to be alone in the room with yourself and like yourself. Because I didn't like what I saw when I was alone. That's what made me feel uncomfortable with it. And thankfully I had my husband and my girls who were all in for me to get through this process. So sitting in silence was something we all did together in the same room. They were doing it for me to support me because I didn't want to be alone. What your work is just so beautiful. And I just think every single person, it's almost like going on a vacation in a way, even though it can feel like you're fasting at the same time, right? Like there's some kind of exhale that your body physically feels when you go through this process. And I don't know how to explain it any other way than that, but it does do something for you. And when your body can feel it, your mind and your spirit can align with it. Something about how your body just triggers those things. So I love your book. I love your work. I love you.
I love
And
you.
so so I have one final question I ask all of my guests. And so truly I've come up with the question in a way that you can pretty much say whatever you want. It's like a free skate, right? So what is one thing that you wish every midlife woman understood about her beauty, her identity, or her purpose in Christ?
What comes up for me right now is there was a guy, this was probably 30 years ago when I was in a band with Campus Crusade for Christ in college. And he looked at me and he said, Stacy, just love God and do what you want. And I was like, what? And he said, love God and do what you want. And that has stuck with me because if you're aligned to your true authentic self and you give your life over to the care of a loving God and you figure out what you love, you get to love God and do what you want. And I can honestly say, and I can truly say this now, that I am so congruent to not only who I am, but who I wanted to be. And it was a long, winding road to get here. But if I could give any midlife woman some advice, it would be to love God and do what you want. Meaning, bring yourself joy, go to the Zumba class, paint the painting, play the piano, go on the walk, take the bath, take the day off, yeah, more Mary, less Martha.
Every day I have to remind myself that one. But it's so true. And I will say that's what's part of the Making Life Beautiful Again experience, right? Is literally learning how to step back and just breathe and experience life. And you can't do that when you've got tasks on your mind all day long. Um, so I just want to say that this conversation has just meant a lot to me personally. And your methods, like I said, are a major part of me being able to see myself the way I do and being able to just put out there what God has designed me to do. Thank you. I get to do it. We live full time on the road as a nomad, and every single day is an adventure. I get to just experience it, good or bad. So for all the women who are listening, you're in different seasons, and I know that, but I know one thing that we all can say that we understand is we understand what it's like to be burned out, maxed out, distracted, unsure of what to do with a particular situation or moment. When you can finally slow down and rest and let your brain rest out of that survival place, sometimes the answers come then when you're not even trying anymore, right? So that's what I hope that you get to walk away with today by listening to this conversation. Next week we're going a little bit different. I have talked about this subject before, but we're going to be talking about, what does God think about beauty? So if you want to know what the Bible actually says about beauty, we're going to come and chat about it. You can come join us. Thanks for being here today.